Number 10. Gold Monk. Fu Hao was a Buddhist monk who spent most of his life at the Chongfu Temple at Quanzhou, China. He began practicing Buddhism at age 17 and never looked back, and remained at the monastery until his dying day in 1994. The devout monk was 94 years old when he passed. His body was washed, mummified, and placed inside a large pottery jar in a seated pose. 3 years later, the vessel was reopened, and Fu Hao's skin had dried out, but other than that, his body was surprisingly intact. Only a truly virtuous monk's body can resist decay, according to traditional Buddhist beliefs. So when Fu Hao's remains were discovered in such a well-preserved state, it was a big deal. His corpse was washed, then wrapped in gauze and gold leaf. The gilded statue wears a robe and sits on display in a glass case, where people can come and worship him. Encasing monks in gold is a practice reserved for holy men in some areas with strong Buddhist traditions. According to the Associated Press, given his nearly lifelong dedication to the religion, Fu Hao certainly fit the profile for someone who might receive this treatment. Number 9. Bottled wine in urine. A report from back in 2000 details the discoveries of 2 sealed 17th century bottles containing vastly different substances. One was a vintage Portuguese wine that was found on a Dutch warship that sank off the Netherlands coast. The incredibly rare onion-shaped vessel is 350 years old, making it one of the oldest cork bottles ever found, and the vino inside was intact. It was a very fine wine for its time, and it may have been part of a naval officer's booze stash, according to historians who actually sampled the wine. Another cork bottle described in the report was found in 1993 in the foundation of a demolished home south of London. Experts initially thought that the bottle contained wine. They encountered an unpleasant surprise when they opened it and discovered a putrid concoction of hair, urine, and tiny brass pins. Good thing they didn't taste it. These mixtures, known as witch bottles, were popular in England between the 16th and 19th centuries. Their purpose was to ward off evil spirits and fight back against witches' hexes. Around 200 witch bottles have been found throughout the country, but the ones that were discovered prior to this had leaked, and researchers struggled to identify their contents. This artifact proved to be a game changer because it enabled experts to perform a chemical analysis on the liquid inside. And now we know that for 3 centuries, people protected themselves against spells and malevolent spirits with a substance we tend to avoid coming into contact at all costs. Number 8. Death by constipation. Sometime between 1,000 and 4,000 years ago, an ailing man ate nothing but grasshoppers for months as he slowly approached death's doorstep. He lived in what is now Texas and had a condition called megacolon, when a person's large intestines swells to as much as 6 times its normal size. Yikes. The man also suffered from Chagas disease, which prevented his food from digesting properly and led to malnourishment. During his final days, he was most likely unable to walk or eat on his own, according to a new study of his remains. The research found that the man's caretakers removed the legs from grasshoppers and fed him the squishable part of the bugs. As gross as it may sound, it wasn't a terrible idea. Grasshoppers are packed with protein and moisture, according to Carl Reinhard, a researcher who participated in the study. During the early stages of megacolon, the man would have had an easier time eating bugs than actual food. Scientists have carried out numerous studies on his remains ever since they were discovered in a rock shelter in 1937. In addition to being full of grasshoppers, his body contained undigested food and 2.6 pounds of feces that he couldn't pass due to his megacolon. He was constipated for months, leading up to what could only have been an excruciating and agonizing death. Number 7. Human bone instruments. Humans have been memorializing the dead for thousands of years, and we've come up with some pretty creative ways of doing it. But our beliefs and cultures have changed quite a bit over the millennia, and as you're about to learn, not every tradition has stuck. During the Bronze Age in what is now Britain, people buried the dead with the bone fragments of other deceased family members. It was also customary for families to display the bones of their dead loved ones inside their homes. A study published last year found that some people made keepsakes out of the bones, including amulets, ornaments, and other decorative objects. In one grave, archaeologists found a whistle carved from a thigh bone. Experts aren't entirely sure what inspired these traditions. Researcher Tom Booth believes that the bones were considered relics and that people associated them with religious or mythical figures. He pointed out that while these customs are taboo according to modern standards, the line between the living and the dead was more blurred in ancient times than it is today. Death has never been a happy thing, but there have been times and places where people were more comfortable being around it than we tend to be in modern Western society. Number 6. Copal Cipher. The Copal Cipher is a mysterious 18th century manuscript that was handwritten in a code that experts spent decades trying to interpret with no success. It's 105 pages long and contains a mixture of 75,000 Greek and Roman letters, as well as abstract symbols that don't appear to be from the alphabet of any known language. The Copal Cipher was created by a secret society based in Germany, known simply as the Occultist Order of Wolfenbüttel. The organization wrote the manuscript sometime between 1760 and 1780, and it was rediscovered in a German school after the Cold War era. In a 2019 study, a team of researchers realized that the Roman letters are meant to mislead the reader. By overlooking these characters, they finally managed to crack the code. The Copal Cipher's creators were extremely interested in eye surgery and ophthalmology, according to the team, who also found detailed information about an initiation ceremony for new members. These writings appear to be connected to Count Friedrich August von Veltheim, who founded the occultist order in 1742. Based on the manuscript's flyleaf, it appears as though the original owner was someone known simply as Philip 1866. Members of the occultist order operated under beliefs similar to the Freemasons. They referred to themselves as the High Enlightened. Their declared goal was to establish a peaceful community that welcomed people of all races, nationalities, and religions. Pope Clement XII disbanded the group, but the organization's mission is still very much alive in a sense. Centuries after all this happened, people are still trying to figure out how to create a peaceful society, and with very little success. Number 5. Ancient Oversized Writing. While working at the El Kawi site near the ancient Egyptian city of El Kab in 2017, a team of archaeologists noticed some unusually large carvings scrawled onto a cliff face. The artwork consists of a bull's head on a pole, 2 storks, and a type of bird called the ibis. These oversized etchings date back to roughly 5,500 years to sometime around 3250 BC. They're the oldest known example of hieroglyphics that were made during the writing system's early formative stages. When the carvings were done, ancient scribes were just beginning to master hieroglyphics. While most Dynasty O are less than an inch tall, the ones at El Kawi are up to 27 inches tall. They predate other large hieroglyphics by roughly 300 years. The images resemble mythical creatures that were eventually used to convey a pharaoh's power. Egyptologist John Darnell, who led the team that made the discovery, believes that the carvings were a boundary marker of sorts, a way of identifying a particular king's jurisdiction. In his words, the artwork was a way for travelers to know that they were entering an area under official authority. He cites the oversized hieroglyphics as evidence that the writing system was established much more quickly than experts previously believed, and that the use for publicly declaring royal rule began early on in its development. Number 4. SixHeaded Chief. Back in 1997, archaeologists discovered a strange ancient burial in the Scottish fishing village of Port Mahomet. The bizarre grave, dubbed the Six-Headed Chief, was found near the altar of a former church. At first glance, it appeared to contain the remains of one man surrounded by 5 skulls. Researchers took a closer look and identified the remains of 2 men, plus 4 skulls. DNA evidence is helping to unravel some of the mysteries surrounding the unusual grave. The men were probably related in some way. They were most likely an uncle and nephew or 2 cousins, and they were buried sometime between the 13th and 15th centuries. The 4 disembodied skulls they were laid to rest with also belonged to relatives. 3 of them were one man's grandfather, mother, and father, and the other belonged to a Pictish monk who died several centuries before everyone else. The monk was originally buried in a nearby cemetery. Experts believe his skull may have been a cherished family relic. Graves filled with skulls and other body parts that were removed from family members' graves are about as unusual as it gets, according to archaeologist Cecily Spall, who spoke with Live Science. To make things even weirder, one of the men suffered a violent and excruciating death. Half of his face appears to have either been cut or bludgeoned off. Based on the burial's location near a church, the pair were likely high-ranking members of their society. Number 3. America's oldest outhouse. Around 14,000 years ago, a group of ancient people used the cave as a bathroom in what is now Paisley, Oregon. After staying there for a short period, they moved on, leaving their waste, stone tools, and a few other objects behind. A few years ago, archaeologists working at the cave's lowest excavation level found a collection of fossilized fecal matter or coprolites. The ancient excrement's age adds to a growing list of evidence that humans arrived in North America even before the so-called Clovis people, who came around 13,000 years ago. The Clovis people were long thought to be the first humans to reach the continent, but the coprolites and other recent discoveries are showing that this wasn't the case. Some experts have challenged the findings from the cave in Paisley, arguing that the prehistoric poop was deposited by animals and became contaminated by human DNA. It is possible, but unlikely, according to study co-author and chemist Ian Bull. Most of us would never want to work with human waste, but coprolite discoveries are thrilling to the archaeology community. By examining their contents, researchers are able to learn more about ancient societies' daily lives. They found that the people who answered nature's call inside Paisley caves ate mammoth and other large game, as well as seed coatings, rodent ones, plants, and the outer shells of insects. Unlike coprolites found at sites where waste was deliberately managed, the feces from the cave reflects a nomadic population. The findings could help experts better understand the migration patterns of some of North America's earliest human populations. Number 2. Laptop Lady Statue. Conspiracy theories tend to lean towards the most far-flung explanations possible for archaeological mysteries. This was certainly the case in 2016 when an anonymous YouTuber released a video claiming that an ancient Greek funerary statue depicts a woman holding a laptop with USB ports on the side. The sculpture dates back to around 100 BC and is a type of funerary relief called a naisko. They were used for marking graves, and many of them were created between the 6th century BC and the 1st century AD. Officially titled Grave Naiskos of an Enthroned Woman with an Attendant, it depicts a wealthy woman sitting on an armchair and touching the lid of a shadow box in the hands of a servant girl. But the amateur filmmaker saw the artwork as a prediction. To back up his belief, he cited a sacred archaeological site called the Oracle of Delphi, where priests went to, quote-unquote, connect with the gods and retrieve advanced information. The statue belongs to the J. Paul Getty Museum in Malibu. A curator there named Jeffrey Spire admitted that the object the woman is holding does resemble a laptop, but he told Live Science that it's probably a jewelry box, a mirror, or a box filled with incense. These so-called USB ports are actually drill holes for attaching a bronze or marble object, according to art history professor Jeff Hurwitz. Experts clearly think that this is just another case of someone creating a mystery where one doesn't exist. What do you think? Are they right, or is there perhaps more to the story? Number 1. Out-of-place tombs. Around 2,000 years ago, dozens of people were buried in modest graves at the vast ancient Egyptian necropolis at Saqqara. They were given the most basic embalming treatments and were laid to rest in a pit in a disorganized and seemingly careless way. This indicates that they were commoners, perhaps working or middle-class people. They were not high-ranking members of society. Archaeologists discovered the graves in 2018 near the 4,600-year-old Pyramid of Djoser. They were struck by their presence in an area that was typically reserved for elite burials. The bodies were poorly preserved and the graves were modest, in the words of Egyptologist Kamil Kuraszkiewicz, who spoke with the Polish press following the discovery. Many of the graves were looted or heavily damaged by time and the elements, but the team found some surviving evidence of the people who occupied them. One coffin features a painting of a necklace and mock hieroglyphics. The person who created the sarcophagus couldn't read or write, so they did their best to imitate the writing system's characters. The casket also bears what Kuraszkiewicz described as beautifully clumsy figures of Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the underworld. However ordinary, these burials are valuable in their own right as a rare example of how rank-and-file members of ancient Egyptian society were laid to rest. They also provide clues about the civilization's hierarchy and social structure. Number 10. Elongated alien skulls. Deep in the mountains of Huancavelica in Peru, a local boy made a shocking discovery. He accidentally stumbled upon a cave of skeletons. But this was unlike any cave of skeletons ever seen before, as the skulls were all elongated and looked as though they came from a race of alien monsters. This terrifying discovery has obviously gathered a whole lot of attention, but unfortunately, these were probably not actual aliens. In reality, the people with elongated skulls had gotten their huge heads from a process called cranial deformation hundreds of years ago. According to Professor Melissa S. Murphy, anthropologists thoroughly checked the skulls found in Peru to determine that everything about them is 100% human. The eye sockets are completely normal, the teeth are the same as ordinary people, and there is nothing different about the bone structure. The reason the skulls are elongated is because their parents deformed them on purpose as children. It was a process of squeezing their heads tightly, either with 2 pieces of wood or with cloth, until the skull grew upwards in a cone shape. Was it something related to their standing in society? Perhaps only high-ranking families or priests were able to have these cone-shaped heads. Regardless, the real mystery here is why so many of these skulls were discovered in a mysterious cave, almost as if everybody with a weird skull had been dumped there on purpose. Number 9. Unicorn bones. Yes, people have been hunting down evidence of fantastic creatures for centuries, and unicorns are no exception. During medieval times, there was a cave in the Netherlands that was believed to have unicorn bones inside of it. These bones were usually taken from the cave and then sold in pharmacies as a magical cure. But in the 21st century, when researchers went looking for the supposed unicorn bones, they found cave bear bones instead. There were never any unicorns living in the cave. It was all a big medieval sham, but modern researchers did find a strange piece of artwork left behind by Neanderthals. The piece of artwork was found carved into the toe bone of an extinct giant deer. According to the researchers who published their study in the journal Nature Ecology and Evolution, the toe bone dates back 51,000 years. This was a time before Homo sapiens had made it into Western Europe, when the Neanderthal still reigned supreme. The artwork consists of a few simple lines carved into the deer's toe, and although extremely simple, it does show evidence that Neanderthals may have had cognitive abilities extremely similar to the human species. In other words, cavemen weren't quite as dull as the professionals once thought. Number 8. Satanic Vikings. A mysterious rock-shaped-like boat has been discovered in what some have referred to as a satanic Icelandic cave. According to the experts, this strange rock may have been used by the Vikings in some weird attempt to ward off the apocalypse over 1,000 years ago. The discovery was made inside of a cave near an Icelandic volcano that erupted just about 1,100 years ago. This was at a time when the Vikings had only recently colonized the island. The rock was carved to look like a boat and was discovered with a small collection of trading goods from the Middle East. Kevin Smith from Brown University says that an eruption would have been extremely unsettling for the new arrivals on the island, likely sparking fear that Ragnarok, or the end of days, was just around the corner. Believing that their world was about to end, the Vikings probably set up a complex ritual in the cave. Using the stone boat and the artifacts from the Middle East as offerings, they would have also burned animals as sacrifices. And the craziest part is that they must have thought the ritual worked, since the end of the world never showed up afterwards. I guess that's how it works with a lot of prophets who predict the apocalypse, but say if people just do one thing, the world will be saved. If people listen to them, then when the world doesn't end, they get to say, "I told you so." But if the world does end, well, then they have a much bigger problem than a bunch of people calling them a liar. Number 7. The oldest story. Inside a cave on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, scientists have discovered the oldest story ever told. The story was written on the walls of the cave in the form of an ancient painting, showing a pig and buffalo hunt. The whole thing takes up a section of wall, over 12 feet long. There are tiny brown forms, likely meant to be humans, along with huge drawings of local animal species. Since the painting has been dated back to around 44,000 years, scientists say it is the oldest narrative artwork ever found. It's true that the story isn't that interesting. It's really just a tale of humans hunting pigs and buffalo. But it's important because it shows a pivotal point in human history when we began to tell stories through art. Forget about the Renaissance. The true artistic revolution happened in Indonesia almost 50,000 years ago in the darkness of a damp cave. Number 6. The Headless Murderer. A headless body was uncovered in a cave just a few years ago, and it turned out to be a murder suspect from over a century ago. This bizarre story starts in 1916, with a guy named Joseph Henry Loveless. Joseph was in jail in Idaho when he managed to escape by cutting his way out of his cell with a saw that he had hidden in his shoe. Months after his escape, he killed his wife by beating her over the head with an axe, according to a report in the local Idaho newspaper from 1916. Well, Joseph was caught and thrown back in jail. Just weeks later, he used the exact same trick to escape a second time. He then vanished and was never seen again. At least, not until over 100 years later, in 1979, when authorities in Idaho were trying to identify a headless man who was found in a cave. Idaho police knew they were dealing with something old, since the body was badly decomposed. But they honestly had no idea who the headless torso belonged to. That in 1991, a girl exploring the same cave system found a mummified hand, and researchers later uncovered one arm and 2 legs stuffed into a burlap sack. It was clearly the same person. Whoever it was had been cut up and ditched inside the cave. The police just didn't know who the body parts belonged to. Recently, the cops finally used forensic genealogy to try and track down the closest living relative to the dead body. They learned Joseph's identity, making him one of the oldest murder victims ever identified using forensics. But unfortunately, police still don't know who cut this man up and left him headless in the cave. Also, his head has never been found. Number 5. Cave under the floorboards. A man recently discovered a secret cave underneath the floorboards of his house, dating back to over 50 years. Jake Brown was working on his property in the United Kingdom when he realized one of the walls in his basement didn't quite look right. He drilled a hole through it, peeked inside, and was shocked to see a secret cave hidden behind his wall. It was right there, and he had never even known about it. Naturally, Jake broke down the wall and entered the cave. It was filled with artifacts from the early 1900s. Judging by the newspapers and old junk, the thing had been sealed for at least 5 decades. It was also surprisingly big, about 15 feet deep and at least 9 feet wide. There were bottles of paint cans and a whole lot of trash. The cave may have been used as a kind of garbage dump for construction workers in the 1950s or 60s. The good news is that Jake now has an extra room in his house. Talk about a man cave. If you suddenly found a new secret room in your house, what would you do with it? Would you make a wine cellar, or would you put it in a secret door so you could hide there and win any game of hide and seek? Tell me your ideas in the comments below, then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more awesome videos. Number 4. The Spirit Cave Mummy. The Spirit Cave Mummy is over 10,000 years old. 10,600 years old to be exact, discovered in the year 1940 by a pair of archaeologists named George and Sidney Wheeler. The archaeologist couple found the mummy inside a rocky cave in Nevada. There were actually a few mummies inside, one that was only partially preserved and another that was found wrapped in a blanket made of rabbit skin and reed mats, so well preserved that he still had moccasins on his feet. At first, the experts thought the mummy was about 1,500 years old. It wasn't until the 1990s when it was properly dated and revealed to be the oldest mummy ever found in North America. Then, in 1997, a legal battle shook the country because the Native Americans in the Nevada region wanted the mummy for themselves, since, it was one of their own ancestors. But the federal government denied the Native Americans access to the mummy and said basically, finders keepers. It took 20 years and a DNA test for the mummy to finally be handed over to the Paiute Shoshone tribe. The DNA revealed that the skeleton was definitely related to the indigenous people in the area, and finally the government relinquished control in November of 2016. The Paiute Shoshone then held a new burial ceremony and put the dead guy back into the ground where he belonged. Number 3. The Centipede King. There is a deadly Centipede King ruling over a poisonous kingdom from the underworld, deep in the forests of Romania. This terrifying centipede was discovered inside the Movila Cave, one of the most toxic places in the world. It's a cave system that hasn't had any access to daylight in nearly 6 million years. It's pitch black inside and filled with dangerous toxins. And within this hellish environment, experts have found a venomous centipede that acts as the top predator. Movila Cave is over 65 feet beneath the surface of the earth. It's warm, the air is moist, there is almost no oxygen, and the atmosphere is made up of thick, toxic gas. But the toxic gas actually works in favor of the creatures living inside the cave. There are spiders, scorpions, snails, creepy leeches, and basically everything terrifying that you could think of. All these creatures live inside an environment so toxic that it could kill a person within just a handful of seconds if they were to try and breathe the air. As you can probably imagine, it's been difficult for scientists to study the creatures inside the cave. It's dark and they have to breathe using special apparatuses. Yet despite the challenge, researchers have found over 50 species here, with the biggest being the predatory centipede. It measures roughly 2 inches in length and has one of the most toxic bites of any centipede known to man. Number 2. Microbrew Cave. Ever wanted to try the oldest beer ever? You're in luck! The very first microbrew ever crafted may have been 13,000 years ago for a funeral. This weird discovery happened inside of a burial cave in Israel, where archaeologists found traces of wheat and barley. Li Liu, a professor at Stanford University, said the presence of wheat and barley in this ancient cave suggests the oldest brewed alcohol in the world. But just who was crafting beer over 10,000 years ago inside of a cave? Experts say it was the Natufians, a culture of Stone Age people who lived from between 15,000 to 11,500 years ago. They established some of the first settlements in history, and scientists say they could be the first people to ever domesticate animals. With this latest discovery, it looks like the Stone Age humans also figured out how to mix wheat and barley to craft beer, which they then drank at funerals, perhaps to lessen the pain of grief. If you ask me, the Stone Age cavemen weren't so primitive after all. Number 1. The first human clothes. When did humans start wearing clothes? No other animal needs to wear clothing, so why did humans suddenly get bashful? This is a question that scientists have been trying to answer for decades. Now, a discovery in a cave in Morocco may have just revealed the very first time that humans put on clothing. One of the biggest issues with trying to solve the mystery is that organic materials don't preserve well. After just a few years, most organic things like leather or fur are already decomposed. However, researchers looking at 62 bone tools found in the Moroccan cave dated back to around 120,000 years ago have found a different way to answer the question. These mysterious stone tools appear to have been used in the processing of animal skins. In other words, they may have been the tools used by primitive human ancestors to create the earliest clothing ever. We don't know what these clothes look like, if they were making loincloths out of furs or what, but this is the earliest evidence of clothing manufacturing ever. Which of these bizarre cave discoveries was your favorite? Number 10. The Panther Dog. Everyone has heard of the infamous panther. This fierce, big cat is typically portrayed as midnight black with sharp teeth and claws and the ability to sneak up on prey and strike without mercy. But did you know that a similar breed of dog exists now? Yes, there really is a panther dog. They turned up in the United States in the 1970s when breeders Michael Stratton and Lucas Lopez began working on how to create the perfect guard dog. They took the genes from Staffordshire Terriers, Doberman Pinschers, Black Labs, and Great Danes and selectively bred them to promote the characteristics they wanted. The Panther Dog is technically a mixed breed, though it does now have an established bloodline and a few generations of familial history. Eventually, it should become an officially recognized dog breed. But just what exactly does the Panther Dog look like? It is an absolute beast with a heavily muscled body, a wide chest, and strong jaws. These dogs are lean and strong and look intimidating. Anyone who saw you walking with a Panther Dog would never even try to pull something funny. Males can grow to be up to 140 pounds, while females are a bit smaller at up to 105 pounds. And while it's true these dogs are loyal and loving with their families, they are wildly protective and sometimes inherently distrustful of strangers. The one thing that's for sure is that the Panther Dog will never back down from a fight. In fact, if you want a guard dog that's also great with your family, there's almost no better choice than this panther-like pup. Number 9. Cambodian Razorback Dog. That's right, there are dog breeds out there that were bred to look as close as possible to the legendary Stegosaurus. Of course, they aren't actually dinosaurs, but scientists know that the Stegosaurus had plates that stood up all along its back, and this breed has the same characteristic. It's a unique dog native to Cambodia that most people have never heard of. It's called the Cambodian Razorback Dog, and it's a breed endemic to the Mekong River Valley in Cambodia. But even in their home country, these dogs are a rare breed. What makes them so distinct is that they have ridges of hair along their back, almost as if their hair is always standing up. This makes them look as if they're always on guard and ready to attack. They are known for being protective household guardians, though they're abnormally aggressive to strangers and other people's pets. One of the unfortunate things is that a lot of the Cambodian Razorback dogs are strays, simply wandering around in the jungle. This makes them excellent outdoor survivalists. In fact, they shouldn't even really be kept in the house. They're much more at home, running through the forest and even hunting wild animals. In Cambodia, many people befriend these dogs so that they hang around their houses, keeping them safe from potential intruders. How do they befriend them, you ask? How else? They offer them food, water, and shelter. And let's be honest here, if you had a dog like this sitting outside your home, gnawing on a bone, strangers would think twice before approaching. Number 8. Panda Dog. The Panda Dog might just be the cutest thing you've never seen in your life. It's also a dog that is somewhat controversial. It only recently appeared in Japan, blending the exotic look of a panda with the cuteness of a dog. Unfortunately, the Panda Dog isn't actually a breed. In Tokyo, a Maltese Poodle mix was adopted by a man named Kensuke Hirakawa, who went on to give the little puppy an adorable makeover. He used non-toxic hair coloring designed specifically for dogs to dye parts of his new friend's fur to exactly match the pattern of a panda. The result is utter cuteness. The reason the Panda Dog is controversial is that many people don't think dogs should have their hair dyed, and that is cruel. But that hasn't stopped people from copying Kensuke and creating their very own panda dogs. It's become something of a fad in Japan, with panda dogs roaming the streets almost everywhere you look. What do you think? Is it cruel to dye your dog's hair to make it look like a panda? Or is it just a style choice, like taking it to the groomers and having its hair trimmed? Or putting a doggy sweater on it? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Then remember, if you haven't subscribed to Talltanic yet, do that now. Many more interesting videos are getting released soon, and you don't want to miss them. Number 7. The Pitbull Cheetah. Pitbull cheetahs. They really do exist. It's not a genetic mixture between a cheetah and a pitbull, as that would be impossible. But it's a pitbull that looks an awful lot like a cheetah. It just happens to look like that. It's a genetic outlier, a one-of-a-kind dog. The dog's name is Titus, and he's arguably one of the most unique canines on the planet. News of Titus first emerged on the internet, with pictures of the Albanian pitbull being posted online. We don't know exactly how Titus got his spots. Some say he's a mutant, while others believe he's actually the result of a cruel owner painting the spots on him. Luckily, the owner of the dog came forward to dispel any doubts. He claims the dog is 100% real, and that the cheetah spots were not painted. And to be honest, this wouldn't be the weirdest dog ever born. Sometimes dogs are born with spots like a cheetah. It just so happens that Titus is the first globally famous pit bull with this rare condition. Number 6. Fashionista Hound. Every Afghan hound in the world is a bit of a fashionista, but in China, one particular Afghan hound is the most fashionista of them all. The Afghan hound is slender, he loves posing for photographs, and he's got the most incredible hair that you've ever seen. His locks are luxurious, the result of the dog's owner, a guy named Kevin Chan, spending 8 hours bathing and grooming the dog each week. He also spends quite a bit of money on hair products for his diva dog, around $15,000 in total in just 3 years. Each week, he spends about $150 on bathing products, and while that may seem like a lot of money, Kevin says it's worth it because he considers his dog, named Battle, to be a beloved member of the family. But just what kind of grooming needs to be done to make a dog look like this? Kevin sprays a nutritious solution into the dog's fur to keep it smooth, then brushes with talcum to detangle the knots. He does this every single day, sometimes for 2 full hours. Kevin is so crazy about his dog that he even purchased a professional camera and took lessons in photography. He now shares pictures of his pooch on social media, and as for the dog, he seems to really love all the attention. Would you ever go through all of this trouble just to make your dog into a model? Do you think $15,000 is too much for hair products? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 5. Mop Dogs. Mop Dogs are definitely weird. They look like giant mops that should be dipped in soap and water and used to clean the floor. In fact, if you were to walk by a sleeping mop dog, you probably wouldn't even know it was alive. These creatures are officially called Commodore dogs, and they are a rare breed. Instead of having normal dog hair, they have a tasseled coat of tight cords that kind of look like dreadlocks. But to the casual observer, they look more like the cords from an old mop. These dogs originally come from Hungary, where their mop-like coats help them survive in the brutally cold winters. The coats also help them to stay camouflaged in the snow. According to the American Kennel Club, Mop Dogs are a working breed. They're actually a type of sheepdog originally worked in Hungary to help guard and herd flocks of sheep. This was hundreds of years ago, but even though they've been around for so long, it's estimated there are only about 10,000 of them still left in the world today. Number 4. The Mummy Dog. One of the most incredible dogs ever is a nameless canine who got stuck in a tree and turned into a mummy. The bizarre story of the mummy dog starts 40 years ago when a pooch scrambled into the hollow of a tree, probably chasing a squirrel, and couldn't get out. The dog's life ended pretty sadly, but at least he's been mummified for the rest of eternity. This happened deep in the woods of Alabama. The hound remained locked in the tree trunk until a logging crew cut the tree down in 1980. They couldn't believe their eyes when they found the perfectly preserved dog still there. According to the experts, the dog had been kept safe from predators, the weather, and insects, thanks to the thick wood of the tree. He's since been named Stucky and handed over to the Southern Forest World Museum, where people from all over the world come to get a look at the curious dog mummy. Number 3. Kahola Leopard Dog. The Kahola Leopard Dog is the closest thing you'll find to a mix between a leopard and a dog. Its striking appearance is trumped only by its work ethic. These hardy animals were bred to work in swamps, meaning they require a tough leader and a lot to do. Otherwise, they'll tear your house apart. This breed doesn't always look like a leopard, but they are known to have leopard-like spots on certain areas of their body, normally the head and the chest. They are also incredibly rare as purebreds, but can be found in the US if you look hard enough. One of the big issues with identifying a Kahola leopard dog is that they all look strikingly different. Some don't have any leopard spots, while others are covered head to toe. Number 2. The Clone. Imagine loving your dog so much that when they pass away, you spend $50,000 to have them cloned. Forget about rare dog breeds. The most interesting dog in the world is actually a science experiment named Ziggy. According to the California couple who paid the big bucks to have the clone created in a laboratory, the resemblance between Ziggy and his predecessor is uncanny. The original dog was named Marley, a happy Labrador. Alicia and David Sherhart were devastated when their beloved Marley passed away and ascended to doggy heaven. Upset and not knowing what to do, they managed to get a hold of a company called Viagen Pets, who agreed to do the cloning. The $50,000, according to Alicia and David, was a small price to pay to bring their dog back to life. But it wasn't as if the couple literally resurrected their dog. The cloning process is actually quite complicated. It's the same technology that was used to clone a sheep back in 1996. A veterinarian takes tissue from the dead dog, which is then used to culture new living cells. Those cells are then used to replace the nucleus of a female dog's egg. The result is a nearly identical dog to the one that died. What's even more interesting is that not only does Ziggy look exactly like Marley, the original, they also have the same personality, they play the exact same way, and Ziggy has the same favorite toys as Marley did. Perhaps that says something about how much we were influenced by our own genes. Number 1. Double-nosed Andean Tiger Hound. The double-nosed Andean Tiger Hound is a rare dog breed that comes from the Amazon rainforest. Until recently, it was considered a legend and not even a real animal. The first encounter with this mysterious dog came in 1913 in the country of Bolivia. It was Percy Fawcett, the legendary British explorer, who reported finding a dog with two noses, or perhaps more accurately, a single nose that looked as if it had been cut in half with a knife. From what Percy could gather, the dog had been trained by the local tribes to help hunt jaguars. Unsurprisingly, nobody believed Percy was telling the truth, and it wasn't until almost 100 years later, in 2005, that a modern explorer confirmed the existence of the double-nosed dog. Nobody knows exactly where these dogs came from. Almost no single breeder in the US has been able to get a hold of one, and so far as we know, they're all still hiding out in the Amazon jungle. Which of these incredible dogs would you love to own for yourself? Let us know in the comments, and thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe for more. See you next time. Bye!